The rain falls hard on empty city streets, neon lights reflecting on puddles like broken glass. A pair of hands grip a badge, the metal cold and heavy, a symbol of trust and duty. But trust is fragile. One choice, one moment of greed, and even the strongest brotherhood can tear apart. Tonight you will see how loyalty is tested, how bonds are broken, and how the badge sometimes shields not justice, but betrayal. In the heart of the city, among flickering streetlights and the distant wail of sirens, there were two men who had become more than colleagues. They were brothers. Not by blood, but by shared struggle. Every late-night shift, every tense moment facing danger together, had built a bond that seemed unbreakable. Their lives intertwined with cases, secrets, and an unspoken code. Watch each other's back, no matter what. They were the kind of partners people told stories about, the kind who could read each other's eyes across a chaotic crime scene and know what the other thought without speaking a word. They started as rookies, unsure and nervous, learning to navigate a world filled with violence, corruption, and the weight of responsibility. At first, it was survival. Every minor victory, the first arrest, the first night patrolling together, cemented their reliance on one another. But over time, that survival became something deeper. There were moments, small and quiet, where one would cover the other's mistake, or share a simple joke to ease the tension after a harrowing call. These moments weren't dramatic, but they were the threads that wove a brotherhood. It was a bond forged in fire, shaped by the harsh reality of the streets, and held together by unspoken trust. They weren't perfect. They argued. They clashed over methods and decisions. One favored caution, the other took risks. But those disagreements never broke them. They were the friction that made their partnership stronger, a constant reminder that even in the most dangerous places, there could be loyalty, understanding, and respect. In those moments, the city didn't feel so lonely. They had each other, and that was enough. The badge they wore wasn't just a symbol of law or authority. It was a reminder of their commitment to the people, to the rules, and most importantly, to each other. Every morning, when the sun barely lit the streets, they would clip it onto their chest, silently acknowledging that today they were together, and together they could face anything. But beneath that shine of metal and honor, shadows lurked. Temptation, greed, and ambition waited quietly, patient and silent, ready to test everything they had built. The question was simple. Would their bond survive when loyalty collided with desire? Would the brotherhood hold when one man's choices threatened to destroy them all? In this city, trust was a currency, and they had spent it freely on each other. They believed nothing could break it. But sometimes, even the strongest chains have weak links. And when those links snap, the rip can destroy more than friendship. It can destroy lives, careers, and the very sense of justice they had sworn to protect. Tonight, you will witness the story of that rip, the night when loyalty met greed, and the badge became both shield and weapon. The city never sleeps, and neither do its temptations. What began as whispers in the dark soon grew louder, winding around the edges of loyalty like smoke. At first, it was small things. An officer accepting a coffee from a local informant, a minor shortcut to close a case faster. Harmless, almost invisible. But little by little, the rules blurred, and what seemed like small favors became steps into dangerous territory. Money began appearing where it shouldn't, deals struck behind closed doors, and favors traded with shadows that weren't entirely legal. It started to weigh on the conscience, but the lure was strong. One night, after a long shift chasing suspects through slick streets and abandoned warehouses, one of the brothers paused outside the precinct. His hands shook slightly as he held a thick envelope, heavier than he expected. Inside was cash, unmarked, untied, offered as gratuity for turning a blind eye. At first, he laughed it off, tossing it into a locker as if it had never happened. But that laugh carried a tension his partner noticed. Trust had been forged in fire, but greed, quiet and patient, was beginning to creep in like a cold fog. It wasn't just about money. The temptation came in many forms: power, influence, the ability to bend rules without consequences. He began to see situations not as crimes to solve, but as opportunities. Cases that once mattered became transactions, people became pawns, and the badge started to feel less like honor and more like leverage. His brother noticed the change, the hesitation at a scene, the subtle shift in tone, the way he lingered on envelopes or looked at evidence differently. He wanted to confront it, to believe it was just stress, just exhaustion, just a temporary lapse. But deep down he felt the chill of unease settling between them. The more the temptation grew, the more he rationalized it. "I deserve this," he told himself. "I risk my life every day. Everyone bends the rules a little. Who would notice?" It was the kind of thinking that can destroy the strongest bond, because it starts with small compromises. He started hiding things: cash, conversations, files, and the secrecy built walls between him and the only person who trusted him without question. Meanwhile, his brother remained unaware of the full extent, seeing only fragments and trying to trust the instinct that had guided them for years. But the city notices everything. Corruption leaves traces. And once the first seeds of greed are planted, they grow fast. Deals are made, whispers turn into rumors, and one slip can spiral into consequences neither brother could anticipate. Each choice to ignore the rules, to take advantage, chipped away at the foundation they had built together. Loyalty became a fragile thing, easy to fracture, and the badge, once a symbol of honor, became a silent witness to compromise. Even in the quiet moments when the streets seemed empty, and the only sound was the wind whistling past lampposts, he felt the weight of the choice he was making. A single envelope, a single decision, could unravel everything. And yet, the temptation was irresistible. It wasn't about the money alone. It was about proving to himself that he could step beyond the rules, that he could take what others couldn't, that he could rise above the system that he had sworn to protect. And that was the beginning. The first crack in the bond that had once seemed unbreakable. The first moment where greed planted a shadow over brotherhood. A shadow that would grow, stretch, and eventually threaten to tear apart everything they had built together, leaving nothing but a rip in the badge. And in their lives. The city seemed quieter than usual that night, but danger was closer than ever. One of the brothers had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. What had started as small compromises, the quiet acceptance of favors, the hidden cash, the subtle bending of rules, had grown into a decision that would shatter everything. A single act, one move driven by greed, and the bond they had spent years building was at risk of being destroyed forever. It began with a tip. A case that promised high reward, money, influence, a way to rise above the grind of the streets. But this tip came with a choice: protect the brotherhood and uphold the law, or take what no one else could, at the cost of trust and loyalty. The envelope he had once hesitated to touch now called to him, heavier, more dangerous, promising a future built on betrayal. And he took it. The act was small, almost invisible to anyone watching. A file left slightly out of place, a subtle misstep that allowed evidence to disappear, a decision to let someone slip through the cracks. But to his brother, the change was immediate, even if he didn't yet know the cause. Suspicion crept in, unspoken and sharp, like a blade held just behind the back. He sensed it in the way his partner avoided eye contact, in the tension during briefings, in the uncharacteristic mistakes that seemed intentional. His stomach tightened. Something had changed, and he knew it. When the truth finally came to light, it hit like a thunderclap. The brother he had trusted with his life, the one who had saved him countless times, laughed with him through exhaustion, and shared in victories and defeats, had chosen personal gain over loyalty. The betrayal wasn't just about the envelope, the money, or the influence. It was about the breach of faith, the disregard for a bond that had once been stronger than fear, stronger than danger, stronger than anything the streets could throw at them. The revelation was silent, devastating, and faceless. No raised voices, no dramatic confrontation. Just glances that said more than words ever could, hands lingering over badges, evidence scattered like broken promises, and the heavy, suffocating weight of realization. The city outside continued its endless hum, unaware of the quiet disaster unfolding within the walls of the precinct. But inside, a brotherhood had been ripped apart. The betrayed brother faced a choice: confront, forgive, or turn away. Every instinct screamed for justice, but the bond they had shared complicated the rage. He remembered the nights of camaraderie, the life-or-death moments, the silent promises of protection. And yet, the envelope, the choice, and the act of betrayal hung between them like a thick, dark curtain. He felt the sting of loss, not of a friend, but of trust itself, something that once broken could never be fully mended. In that moment, the badge, which had once symbolized honor, integrity, and shared purpose, became a reminder of compromise, a witness to a fracture that no apology could repair. Brotherhood had been tested, and it had failed. Greed had claimed victory over loyalty, leaving only the painful truth: even the closest bonds can be destroyed by ambition and desire. Shadows filled the precinct, silent and heavy, marking the first night of a rip that would continue to grow, spreading through lives, careers, and the very sense of justice they had vowed to protect. And so, the stage was set. Trust had been broken, loyalty challenged, and the consequences of one man's greed would ripple far beyond the walls of the station. The brotherhood that once seemed unshakable now teetered on the edge, fragile and vulnerable, waiting for the fallout that was inevitable, unavoidable, and devastating. The city never stops, but for them, everything changed in an instant. The betrayal was no longer just a secret hidden in shadows. It had spilled into the open, leaving chaos in its wake. Word spread through whispers, rumors, and uneasy glances in the precinct. Colleagues who once respected them now questioned everything. Every decision, every action, every arrest was now under suspicion. The streets they had walked together as brothers felt colder, more dangerous, and far less familiar. The officer who had been betrayed struggled to reconcile his feelings. Anger burned in his chest, but it was mixed with disbelief, grief, and a deep, aching sense of loss. He replayed years of shared moments, high-speed chases, life-saving rescues, the laughter in quiet corners of the precinct, and realized that all of it now existed under a shadow of doubt. Trust, once absolute, had fractured, and fractures grow. Small cracks that were ignored at first had widened into chasms, leaving him staring into a void he wasn't sure he could cross. Meanwhile, the officer who had betrayed the bond faced his own consequences, though they were quieter and no less sharp. Money, power, and influence might have seemed like rewards at the time, but now each victory felt hollow, each step forward carrying the weight of guilt. Colleagues who had once looked up to him now regarded him with caution, suspicion, or even disdain. The badge on his chest, once a symbol of honor, now felt heavier than ever, a constant reminder of a brotherhood he had shattered and a choice he could never undo. Outside the walls of the station, the city mirrored the tension inside. Cases that should have been routine now spiraled out of control. Evidence went missing. Tips were mishandled, and the ripple effect of broken trust began to spread like cracks in concrete. Other officers were forced to step in to pick up the pieces, their morale shaken by the knowledge that one man's greed could compromise the safety of the city itself. The community, unaware of the full story, began to sense the unease. Crime scenes were quieter, reports slower, and the sense of order once taken for granted felt fragile, easily disrupted. And yet, the consequences were not just professional. They were deeply personal. Friendships once thought unbreakable were strained beyond repair. Conversations became guarded, laughter was replaced by tension, and even simple gestures of camaraderie were now tinged with caution. The betrayed brother realized that the city hadn't just lost a trusted officer, it had lost the version of a friend he had once known. Every memory now carried the sting of betrayal. The rip continued to widen. Trust, the invisible glue that had held the brotherhood together, was gone. Ambition and greed had claimed victory, leaving only regret, suspicion, and the quiet knowledge that some actions could never be forgiven. In the dimly lit halls of the precinct, the shadows seemed heavier, stretching across the floor like a reminder that nothing was untouchable. Brotherhood had been tested, loyalty had been challenged, and the cost was higher than either of them could have imagined. By the end of that night, one truth became unavoidable. Greed doesn't just take, it leaves a scar. And scars, unlike bruises, don't fade. They remain, etched into hearts, lives, and the very streets where trust was once absolute. The badge could no longer shield them from the consequences of their choices. The bond that had defined them was broken, and the city too would feel the rip.